Hazel had always existed in the background of other people's lives, the kind of presence that was steady but rarely acknowledged, visible but rarely truly seen, and over time she became used to the subtle ways people overlooked her, the interruptions that cut her thoughts short, the dismissive nods that replaced real listening, and the quiet assumptions that defined her without ever asking who she actually was. And although none of these moments were sharp enough on their own to leave a clear wound, together they formed something heavier. Something that settled deep inside her chest and stayed there, shaping the way she saw herself even when she tried not to let it, because the truth was that being constantly underestimated doesn't break you all at once, it wears you down slowly, layer by layer, until you start questioning whether the version of you that exists in other people's minds might somehow be closer to the truth than the one you feel inside. She heard it often, not in direct insults but in quiet limitations disguised as advice, people telling her to be realistic, to stay within her range, to not overreach. And the words were always delivered casually as if they were harmless, as if they were helping her avoid disappointment, but what they were really doing was placing invisible boundaries around her life, boundaries that no one explicitly forced her to accept yet somehow expected her to obey. And at first Hazel didn't fight those boundaries because she didn't even fully see them, she adapted to them instead, adjusting her behavior in ways that made others more comfortable, speaking less when her ideas felt too big, holding back when her instincts pushed her forward, and slowly becoming the version of herself that required the least resistance from the world around her, and for a while it worked, because it was easier to be accepted in a smaller space than to risk rejection by stepping outside of it. But ease came with a cost, and that cost showed itself in the quiet moments when Hazel was alone with her thoughts, when the noise of the world faded and the voice inside her mind grew louder, asking questions she could no longer ignore, questions about what she was doing with her life, about whether she was settling for something that didn't match who she truly was, about whether the limitations she had accepted were ever real to begin with, and those questions didn't bring immediate clarity, they brought discomfort, a deep restless feeling that followed her even during ordinary moments, making everything feel slightly off, like she was living a life that didn't fully belong to her. And the more she tried to ignore that feeling the stronger it became, until it reached a point where silence was no longer an escape but a mirror reflecting everything she had been avoiding. There were nights when she lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying conversations in her mind and noticing the patterns she had once overlooked, the way people dismissed her ideas before fully hearing them, the way they spoke over her without realizing it, the way they assumed she wouldn't succeed before she even tried, and at first those realizations made her feel small, because it seemed like confirmation of something she feared might be true. But slowly something else began to emerge from those thoughts, something sharper and more grounded, the realization that people weren't judging her based on her full potential. They were judging her based on the limited version of her they had chosen to see, and that difference mattered more than she had ever understood before, because it meant their doubt wasn't necessarily a reflection of her ability, it was a reflection of their perception. That shift didn't immediately change her behavior, but it changed the way she interpreted everything around her, and once that perspective shifted, it became impossible to return to the way things were before, because she started seeing how often people form conclusions quickly and rarely revisit them. How they label someone early and then filter every future action through that label, and how difficult it is to change those labels once they have settled. And for the first time Hazel stopped expecting people to suddenly understand her, she stopped waiting for someone to notice her effort or recognize her potential, because she realized that waiting was the very thing keeping her stuck. It gave control of her growth to people who weren't invested in it, and that was a realization she could no longer accept. One evening, after a day that felt heavier than usual, filled with small moments of dismissal that added up to something much larger, Hazel sat alone and allowed herself to fully feel the weight she had been carrying. She didn't distract herself or push the thoughts away, she let them settle, and in that stillness a question formed that changed everything. A question that stripped away all the illusions she had been holding on to. What if nothing around her ever changed? What if people continued to doubt her, continued to underestimate her, continued to see her as less? And for a moment that thought felt suffocating. But then another thought followed, quieter but far more powerful. What if it didn't matter? What if their belief was never a requirement for her progress? What if she could move forward without it? And that was the moment something shifted, not dramatically, not in a way that would be visible to others, but in a way that redefined her entire approach to life. From that point on, Hazel stopped treating external validation as something she needed before taking action. She stopped waiting for confidence to appear before trying something new. And instead she made a decision that was simple but difficult to follow. She would act first and allow belief to grow from her actions rather than the other way around. And the next few days didn't look any different on the outside. She didn't suddenly transform into a completely new person. She still moved through her routine, still interacted with the same people, still faced the same subtle doubts, but internally everything had changed, because now every moment of hesitation became something she noticed, something she questioned instead of automatically accepting. And that awareness alone began to create small shifts in her behavior. She started taking small steps, not the kind that attract attention but the kind that build momentum. Choosing to act even when she wasn't fully confident, choosing to continue even when progress felt slow, and those choices didn't feel powerful at first. They felt uncomfortable, uncertain, sometimes even pointless, because the results weren't immediate and the world around her didn't suddenly respond differently. People still saw her the same way, still spoke to her with the same assumptions, and that was the hardest part of all. Putting in effort while nothing around you reflects that change. Growing in silence while being treated as if you haven't changed at all. And there were moments when Hazel questioned whether it was worth it, moments when the lack of recognition made everything feel invisible, but each time those thoughts appeared she reminded herself of the truth she had already accepted, that she wasn't doing this for them, she was doing it for herself. Day by day she built discipline, not in a way that was extreme or unsustainable but in a way that was consistent, showing up even when she didn't feel like it, continuing even when motivation disappeared, and over time those repeated actions began to create something stronger than motivation. They created evidence that she could rely on herself, evidence that she could continue even when it was difficult, and that kind of proof changed the way she saw herself, because confidence built on external validation is fragile, it disappears the moment that validation is removed. But confidence built on personal evidence is different, it stays, it grows, it becomes something stable. As Hazel continued this process, she noticed another shift. She became less reactive to the opinions around her, not because those opinions disappeared but because they no longer held the same weight. She understood now that doubt from others didn't need to be confronted directly, it needed to be outgrown, and that understanding allowed her to move with more focus, more intention. She stopped explaining herself to people who had already decided who she was. She stopped seeking approval from those who never offered it. And instead she directed all her energy toward becoming the version of herself she knew existed beneath everything else, and that focus created a quiet transformation that didn't announce itself but could be felt in the way she carried herself, in the way she spoke with more certainty, in the way she no longer shrank to fit into expectations that were too small for her. People around her began to sense the change even if they couldn't fully define it. There was something different about Hazel now, something steady and grounded that hadn't been there before, and while they might not have immediately recognized it as growth, they could feel that she was no longer the same person they had once underestimated, and that subtle shift created a kind of tension. Because when someone begins to step outside the version you have created of them, it challenges your perception. It forces you to reconsider what you thought you knew, and that discomfort often leads to more doubt, not less, because it is easier for people to hold on to their original assumptions than to admit they were wrong. But Hazel no longer saw that as a barrier, she saw it as confirmation that she was moving in the right direction, because change that is real doesn't always get immediate acceptance, sometimes it gets resistance first, and she was prepared for that. She had already decided that her progress would not depend on how quickly others recognized it. And that decision gave her something powerful: freedom. The freedom to continue without needing approval, the freedom to grow without needing permission, and the freedom to define herself based on her actions rather than their expectations. She knew the journey was far from over, she knew that what she had built so far was only the foundation, but for the first time she felt something that had been missing for a long time, not confidence in the sense of knowing she would succeed, but certainty in the sense of knowing she would continue, and that distinction mattered more than anything else. Because success is never guaranteed, but persistence can be, and persistence is what changes everything. And as Hazel moved forward with that mindset, she carried with her a quiet understanding that no matter how long it took, no matter how much doubt surrounded her, she would not return to the version of herself that waited for permission to grow, because she had already stepped beyond that point, and there was no going back. Time did not announce the changes in Hazel's life. It did not arrive with a clear moment where everything suddenly made sense. and it certainly did not offer her recognition as a reward for her quiet persistence. Instead, it moved forward the way it always does, steady and indifferent, while Hazel continued building herself in ways that most people never noticed, and that was the part that would have broken her before: the silence. The lack of visible progress, the absence of acknowledgement. But now it had become something else entirely. It had become her advantage. Because while others measured progress through immediate results and external validation, Hazel had learned to measure it through consistency, through discipline, through the simple fact that she kept going even when there was no reason to believe it would pay off, and that difference in perspective changed everything about how she moved through her life. She no longer rushed to prove anything to anyone, because she understood that rushed proof often collapses under pressure. Instead, she focused on building something that would last. Something that didn't depend on temporary motivation or fleeting confidence, and this required a level of patience that she hadn't possessed before, patience not just with her circumstances but with herself, because growth is rarely smooth. It comes with setbacks, with moments where everything feels like it's falling apart, with days where the progress you thought you made seems to disappear. And Hazel faced all of that without the safety net of encouragement, because the people around her still saw her through the same lens, still expected her to fall back into old patterns, still assumed that whatever change they sensed was temporary, and in a way that made her journey even more difficult, because she wasn't just working against her own doubts, she was moving forward in an environment that quietly expected her to fail. There were moments when that expectation became almost tangible, moments when someone would make a comment that seemed small on the surface but carried a deeper meaning, suggesting that her effort wouldn't last, that she was only going through a phase, that eventually she would return to being the same person they had always known. And those moments could have easily pulled her back, could have made her question everything she was doing, but instead they began to serve a different purpose. They became reminders of why she started, reminders that the version of her people believed in was not the version she intended to remain, and each time she heard that doubt she felt a quiet resolve strengthen within her, not fueled by anger or the need to prove them wrong out of spite, but by something much deeper, a commitment to herself that she would not abandon her progress just because others refused to recognize it. As time passed, Hazel began to notice that her relationship with effort had changed. It was no longer something she associated with struggle or resistance. It became something steady, almost automatic, like a rhythm she had learned to follow without constantly questioning it, and that shift made her more consistent than she had ever been before, because consistency is not built on intensity, it is built on repetition, on showing up even when nothing feels different. And Hazel had reached a point where showing up was no longer a decision she debated, it was simply what she did. And that level of discipline began to create results, not all at once, not in a way that immediately caught attention, but gradually, in ways that started to become harder to ignore. At first the changes were subtle, small improvements that only she could fully recognize, but over time those improvements accumulated. They began to shape her abilities, her mindset, her presence, and eventually they reached a point where they could no longer remain invisible, and that was when the world around her started to shift, not because people suddenly decided to believe in her, but because the evidence of her growth became too clear to dismiss. And even then the shift wasn't immediate or dramatic, it came in small moments: a pause before someone responded to her, a different tone in the way they spoke, a hesitation where there had once been certainty about her limitations. And Hazel noticed all of it, but she didn't let it distract her, because she understood that recognition was not the goal. It was simply a byproduct of the work she had been doing all along. What mattered more to her was the internal change. The way she now approached challenges with a calm focus instead of hesitation, the way she trusted herself to figure things out even when she didn't have all the answers, the way she no longer felt the need to explain or justify her actions to others. And that internal shift was what truly separated her from who she used to be, because before she had relied on external signals to guide her decisions, she had looked for approval, for reassurance, for confirmation that she was on the right path. But now she had something stronger. She had built a sense of certainty that came from her own experience, from the countless moments where she had continued despite doubt, and that certainty made her harder to shake, harder to influence, harder to define by anyone other than herself. As her results became more visible, the reactions around her began to change more noticeably. The same people who had once dismissed her started paying closer attention. They listened when she spoke, they acknowledged her efforts, and some of them even began to offer support. But Hazel saw these changes for what they were. Not a reflection of newfound belief in her potential, but a reaction to the proof she had created, because people often don't believe in possibility until it has already become reality. And while that realization could have made her bitter, it didn't. It simply reinforced what she had already learned, that belief from others is not a prerequisite for success, it is something that often comes after the fact, once the outcome is undeniable. There were also those who struggled to adjust, people who held on to their original perception of her, who downplayed her progress or attributed it to temporary circumstances, and Hazel expected that too, because changing someone's perception is not as simple as showing them evidence. Sometimes it requires them to confront their own assumptions, and not everyone is willing to do that, but she no longer felt the need to convince them, she no longer felt the urge to prove herself through words, because she understood that the most powerful proof is not something you argue, it is something you demonstrate, something that becomes clear over time through consistent action. Eventually there came a point where her results reached a level that could not be ignored, not by those who supported her, not by those who doubted her, and not even by those who tried to remain indifferent. It wasn't a single moment or a dramatic breakthrough, it was the accumulation of everything she had built, all the effort, all the discipline, all the quiet persistence coming together to create something solid, something real, and when that point was reached the reactions around her shifted more significantly, the same voices that once expressed doubt began to change their tone, some of them offering praise, others expressing surprise, and a few even claiming they had always believed in her. And Hazel listened to all of it without letting it change her. Because she remembered clearly what had come before, she remembered the doubt, the dismissals, the limitations that had been placed on her, and while she didn't hold on to those memories with resentment, she kept them as a reminder of how far she had come. Someone eventually asked her how she managed to change so much, how she was able to go from being underestimated to becoming someone others respected, and the question carried a kind of curiosity that she hadn't heard before, a genuine desire to understand rather than to judge, and Hazel considered the answer carefully, not because she didn't know it, but because she wanted to express it in its simplest form, and when she finally spoke her response was quiet but clear. She said that she stopped listening, and while the answer seemed simple it held a deeper meaning, because she didn't just stop listening to others, she stopped allowing their doubts to define her decisions, she stopped letting their expectations limit her actions, and in doing so she created space to discover what she was actually capable of. Her journey was never about proving others wrong in a dramatic or confrontational way, it was never about seeking revenge or validation, it was about reclaiming control over her own life. About refusing to let external doubt determine her internal limits, and that focus is what made her progress sustainable, because it was not driven by emotion alone, it was grounded in discipline, in consistency, in a commitment to growth that didn't depend on how she felt in any given moment, and that commitment is what carried her through the difficult phases, the phases where nothing seemed to be changing, where the effort felt invisible, where the doubt was still present, and those phases were the most important, because they were where the real transformation happened. As Hazel continued forward she realized that the greatest victory was not the change in how others saw her, it was the change in how she saw herself, because she no longer viewed herself through the lens of doubt, she no longer defined her potential based on external opinions, she had built a sense of identity that was rooted in her actions, in her ability to persist, in her willingness to continue even when it was difficult, and that identity gave her a level of stability that could not be easily shaken, because it was not dependent on circumstances. It was built on something much more reliable, her own consistency. In the end the doubt that once surrounded her did not disappear completely, but it lost its power, it became background noise rather than a defining force, and that was all it needed to be, because Hazel had already proven something far more important than what others believed. She had proven to herself that she could move forward without their approval, that she could grow without their recognition, that she could build something meaningful even in an environment that expected her to fail, and that proof was something no one could take away from her, because it was not based on their perception, it was based on her experience, on everything she had done to become the person she is now. And that is what made her success undeniable, not the scale of what she achieved, but the journey she took to get there, the quiet determination, the refusal to stop, the willingness to continue even when no one was watching. Because in the end the most powerful way to prove people wrong is not through arguments or explanations, it is through results, results that speak for themselves, results that make doubt irrelevant, and Hazel had reached that point, not because she demanded recognition, but because she earned it, step by step, moment by moment, without ever needing to announce it, and when people finally saw her for who she had become, it wasn't because she told them, it was because she showed them, and that kind of proof doesn't fade, it stays, it lasts, it becomes part of who you are. And no matter what comes next, Hazel knows one thing with certainty: she will never again allow doubt, whether her own or someone else's, to decide the limits of her life.